Gauss's law relates the electric flux through a Gaussian surface, which is a three-dimensional closed surface, such as a sphere or a cylinder and so on, to the charge enclosed by that surface. So recall that we showed that the electric field, due to a positive charge, has vectors that are always perpendicular to the spherical surface, and the electric field is uniform on the spherical surface, where this closed surface has a radius r, and given that the electric field is always perpendicular to the surface, then this dot product becomes just a product of the electric field by the surface area, and this is the electric flux. So the electric flux, after we cancel these terms, is equal to the charge enclosed in that surface over the permittivity of free space. And if we did the same calculation for a sphere of any radius, then a radius will always cancel. So the total electric flux through a Gaussian surface is independent of the size of the Gaussian surface, as long as the amount of the enclosed charge remains constant. And we won't prove this here, but this is true for Gaussian surfaces that are not spherical. So it may look something like this, for example. So you can visualize this as where the area becomes larger, the electric field gets weaker, and the electric field is stronger where the area is smaller. So where the surface gets closer to the charge. So these cumulative effects will result in the flux being constant. Or another way to look at this is the electric flux through this smaller surface is going to be equal to the electric flux through this larger surface. So in general, we can write the flux as follows, using a circle on the integral. So this states that the flux through a closed or Gaussian surface is equal to the enclosed charge on the permittivity of free space. So in general, we construct the Gaussian surface such that the electric field that's generated by the enclosed charge is either perpendicular or parallel to the different regions of the Gaussian surface. So we saw that for the spherical case, this resulted in a simplified surface integral, which we can evaluate using algebra. So basically we utilize symmetry to construct the Gaussian surface. And now we'll look at some example problems where we apply Gauss's law. Let's apply Gauss's law to determine the electric field due to a charge distribution on a wire. So if we take our Gaussian surface away from the ends of the wire, so we'll give it a length L and a radius of r, so we can see that the electric fields due to the neighboring charges will result in some cancellations. So effectively the net electric field will always act perpendicular to this cylinder. So if we cut out a circular section from this cylinder, the electric field acts as follows, being always perpendicular to the surface. So therefore we can now simplify our flux integral and calculate it using algebra. So we have the electric field, which is uniform on this cylindrical surface. So the area on which it's acting is 2 pi by the radius of the cylinder multiplied by the length of our cylindrical Gaussian surface. So that's equal to the enclosed charge in that surface, which is the linear charge density by the length of the cylinder. And we divide this by the permittivity of free space. So therefore the L's cancel, and the electric field is the linear charge density on 2 pi by epsilon naught by the radius of the cylinder. So similar to the longer integration method that we used previously, where we had the charge distribution on an infinite wire, we see that the electric field is inversely proportional to the vertical distance from the wire. And Gauss's law resulted in a much simpler calculation. Let's use Gauss's law to determine the electric field due to a charge distribution on a thin plate. So remember that the flux through our Gaussian surface is the integral of the dot product between the electric field and a differential area vector, which was equal to the charge enclosed by our chosen surface on the permittivity of free space. So if we take a cylindrical surface that's sufficiently away from the edges of the plate, then we see the electric field vectors due to the neighbouring charges cancel, and that results in a net electric field in the vertical direction. So there's no electric flux through the surface in the radial direction. The electric flux is going to be through the top and bottom of the cylinder. So let's give it a radius r, and the electric field is going to be perpendicular to this surface. So we have the electric field multiplied by the area of this surface, which is pi r squared, and we multiply by 2 because we have the electric flux through the top and bottom of the cylinder, and that's equal to the enclosed charge, which is the areal charge density, multiplied by the cross-sectional area of the cylinder. So the charge is distributed over this area inside our Gaussian surface. So that will be pi r squared. And now we can cancel out pi and r squared. So our electric field, due to this uniformly charged plate, is the areal charge density on 2 by the permittivity of free space. And this is valid if we're sufficiently away from the edges of the plate, where the electric field becomes more complex, and we're close enough to the plate, where the dimensions of the plate are much larger than a distance from the plate. So under those conditions, the electric field is constant. Let's determine the electric field for a few special cases with planar symmetry. Recall that for a thin plate that's positively charged, and at some distance from the plate that's very small compared with the dimensions of the plate, we found the electric field was the areal charge density on 2 by the permittivity of free space, and that was using Gauss's law. Now suppose we have this case of 2 infinite plates that are positively charged, and the distance between these plates is quite small relative to the dimensions of the plate. So if we want the electric field at a point between those plates, well, as we can observe, the electric field vector due to the red plate points upwards, and the electric field vector due to the blue plate points downwards. So therefore the electric field at points between the plates and sufficiently away from the edges is 0. And suppose we want the electric field at a point that's above the positively charged blue plate. Well, in this case we have the electric field vectors pointing in the same direction, and we assume they're the same magnitude because this distance is still sufficiently small compared with the dimensions of the plate. So therefore, the electric field is a superposition of the electric field due to the red plate, and then plus the electric field due to the blue plate. So that's effectively equal to sigma on epsilon naught. And similarly on the other side over here, you're going to get the same result. And I encourage you to actually verify this using Gauss's law. By constructing a Gaussian surface and exploiting planar symmetry. Now suppose we have this case where one of the plates is negatively charged Well, in this case, the electric field vectors are going to point from the positive to the negatively charged plate. So between those plates, using the superposition principle, we're going to get sigma on epsilon naught, as we did for this case, but between the plates. And this configuration of plates is reminiscent with a capacitor, which we'll explore in subsequent videos. Now similarly, outside these plates, so if we look at a point outside the red plate for example, well, as we can see, the red vector, due to the positively charged plate, points downwards, and the blue electric field vector, due to the negatively charged blue plate, points upwards. So these cancel out, and the electric field outside these plates is effectively zero. If a charge density function is given for a charge distribution, such as this one over here, which says that the charge density is a function of the radial distance from the center of the sphere, which has a radius r, then the total charge can be determined by integrating the charge density over the volume of the charge distribution. And note that this method can be applied in 1 and 2 dimensions, where the charge density function describes a charge distribution on a wire or a plate. But let's show the spherical case as an example. So if we want the total charge enclosed by a sphere at some distance r from the center, then we have the total charge is the integral of the charge density function, which is in coulombs per unit volume, over the volume of that sphere. So we can write the differential volume of this spherical shell, which has an infinitesimal thickness in the radial direction, as the surface area of the shell by its thickness. And then we're going to integrate this from naught to r. So taking the constants outside the integral, so I have 4 pi rho m on r being the radius of the sphere, and then we're integrating r cubed over r. So what we get is 4 pi rho m on r by r to the 4 on 4, evaluated from naught to r. So effectively the total charge inside this sphere with the radius of r is pi rho m on r by r to the 4, where these 4's cancelled. So now applying Gauss's law, and because the electric field is constant across that surface and always perpendicular to the surface, so we can multiply the electric field by the surface area, and that's equal to the enclosed charge inside that surface, which is given by this function. So we have pi rho m on r by r to the 4, and we divide the total enclosed charge in that surface by the permittivity of free space. So that's Gauss's law. And now if we cancel pi and divide through by 4r squared, we obtain electric field being equal to rho m on 4r epsilon naught by r squared. So this is where r is less than or equal to the radius of the sphere. So the magnitude of the electric field varies parabolically up to r. So at this point over here, the magnitude of the electric field is rho m on 4 epsilon naught by r. Now if we take our closed Gaussian surface outside the charged spherical body, so we have another spherical Gaussian surface which has some radius r, then the total enclosed charge in this case is obtained by evaluating this integral from 0 to r. So therefore our integral will be evaluated from 0 to r, and therefore this becomes r to the 4. So our total charge is effectively pi rho m by r cubed. So given this is our spherical Gaussian surface, we still have the electric flux through that surface as the electric field by 4 pi r squared, and the charge enclosed in that surface is pi rho m r cubed. And we divide this by the permittivity of free space. So if we do some cancellations, our electric field is rho m r cubed on 4 epsilon naught by 1 on r squared, where r is greater than or equal to the radius of our charged sphere. So therefore the strength of the electric field outside this sphere drops off with r squared. So the charged spherical body behaves like a point charge.